At the time, the whole thing was kind of treated as a very disturbing but isolated incident, a disgruntled landlord against their tenant, that kind of dispute. Just again, very siloed and isolated. But then, just a few weeks later, something even more insane happened in the Zizian circle. On New Year's Eve in 2022, the Philadelphia suburb of Chester Heights in Pennsylvania was filled with people who were all getting ready to ring in the new year with their family and their friends. And inside one of the homes in that suburb was Richard and Rita Zajko, a retired couple living in their 70s who had lived in that home for decades. Neighbors described them as warm, very private. Rita was very friendly, very active in the community, and Richard was always fixing something, kind of keeping their home nice and ready, and nearby rental properties also in good shape, and just really kind people.
Just passing, going for walks as a family. He was always outside cutting his grass or cleaning the leaves, or they always had impeccable Christmas lights every single year.
Richard and Rita had adopted their only daughter, Michelle, as a baby back in the early 90s. And for most of Michelle's childhood, she was just like the apple of their eye. They absolutely doted on her, adored her, and loved her. But as Michelle grew up, her relationship with her parents became more complicated. See, Michelle was super creative and very, very smart, but she was also a little offbeat. In high school, she called herself an art nerd. But at home, things were very tense, so much so that at one point, Michelle wrote that her parents had forced her to eat meat and had forced her to dye her hair, which were both things that were apparently completely against her values. So to Michelle's family, it was nothing more, than teen rebellion, a teen acting out and trying to find her own place in the world. But at the time, the friends who knew Michelle said that they started to feel her pull away. Then, after high school, she went on to university, which family was hopeful she would find herself, that she would kind of regulate back to the Michelle that they knew, they loved. But while she was at university, she ended up switching majors after she had found this community of rationalist thinkers online. So she ended up earning a master's degree in bioinformatics and eventually moved to California. And sure enough, when she made that move, she got involved with the Zizian group. And online, she defended their beliefs and she spoke very highly of Ziz. So going back to New Year's Eve, by New Year's Eve of 2022, Michelle hadn't seen her parents in almost a year. And the truth was, she never would again. Because around 11:30 p.m., a neighbor's Ring camera caught a car pulling into Richard and Rita's driveway. Then, a few minutes later, someone inside the house shouted, "Mom!" Then, "Oh my God, oh God, oh God!" And 9 minutes after that, 2 people were seen leaving the house and driving away. Now, to this day, the identities of who went into that family's home that night, it still remains a mystery. But 2 days later, on January 2nd, 2023, police entered the home and they discovered the bodies of Richard and Rita. Rita had been shot once in the back of the head, and Richard had been shot in the temple. Only 2 bullets were fired, but both of them were deceased. Now, inside the house, the investigators found Michelle's ID, which they thought that could be a crucial piece of evidence in this investigation. They used it to start tracing her movements and her location, and they found her all the way up in Vermont. Now, when they found her, Michelle was cooperative with the police, and she gave them a voluntary interview. She claimed that she hadn't even been to Pennsylvania since before the pandemic, and that she hadn't seen her parents since early 2022. But later, she admitted that her mom had texted her just hours before the murders about a savings bond that Michelle could cash soon. So initially, it seemed like while Michelle was trying to kind of give off the vibe that she and her parents were estranged and hadn't seen each other in a long time, the reality was they were definitely still in touch with one another. Michelle wasn't arrested, but it is safe to say that she was on the police's radar because the cops also learned that she had legally purchased a Smith & Wesson handgun in Vermont a few months earlier. And the same kind of ammo that had been used for that gun was the type of ammo that had been used in the murder of her parents. And sure enough, when the police took a closer look at Michelle's gun, they had noticed that it had recently been cleaned. Still, though, without any hard proof placing her at the scene in Pennsylvania, states away, no charges were filed. But like I said, Michelle was definitely still on the investigators' radar because they wanted to execute a search warrant. They wanted to see what else they could figure out about this situation.